Welcome to the PhoneArena video review of Apple's iPad. The iPad is designed like a giant iPhone. It has a 9.7-inch display, and down at the bottom we can see it has a single home button. Along the edges we'll find a volume rocker and a switch. Instead of the vibrate switch like on the iPhone, this switch enables a rotation lock. Up at the top we've got our power key and 3.5mm headset jack. The bottom of the iPad has Apple's proprietary connecting port and a set of speakers. In terms of feel, the iPad is very like the first generation iPhone. As you can see, and it's got an all aluminum back. The front is made of glass, and it is quite heavy. It only weighs in at 1.7 pounds, but for such a thin device, you expect it to weigh less. Almost the first thing everybody said when picking it up was how heavy it was. Still, compared to a 2.5 pound netbook, the iPad isn't that much different. As you'll notice, the software looks very similar to the iPhone as well, and that's because it runs the iPhone interface. We've got all our different apps, as well as a launcher bar at the bottom. The launcher bar ships with only 4 apps down there, but you can actually put more in there. In terms of feel, the iPad has a very solid construction to it. This is something we'd expect from Apple. However, it's always nice to actually see it. Edges are relatively soft. It's most natural in its landscape orientation. When held like this, the device feels a lot lighter. In widescreen, you of course can watch videos as well, which are going to be a lot more natural. It doesn't have a 16.9-inch display, so we're going to see some black bars up at the top for HD content. The HD content isn't actually HD either, since the iPad's resolution doesn't support it. Still, the screen is very bright and crisp, and videos look good, even over streaming services such as Netflix or ABC's Player. Thanks to the bigger screen, developers now have a lot more room to work with. Let's open Pandora and check it out. On the left of the screen here, we can see all our stations, and as it loads, we'll be able to see the music. This, of course, is a bad example because it doesn't give us anything. Let's try and get another track. Here we go. We've got all kinds of information about the artist. The nice thing is we can switch back and forth between these. So even though we can't change the song per se, we can see the old artist information easily. A great example of this as well is with magazines. Let's launch the latest issue of GQ. As you can see, we can scroll through the pages here. If we flip it, we have a different view, which is kind of cool. Here we've got the pictures up top, which we can scroll through, and then down at the bottom we have our article. This is more of a traditional view, and while you can't quite flip the pages, you still can flick through them. USA Today is another good app for this. This, of course, is a newspaper. We have large text, nice pictures, and we can scroll through them. These are some of the early apps, so remember that developers are going to find more and more ways to take advantage of this large screen. We like that we have customized weather and sports scores on the side. The top runs through headlines, and then of course we have our articles down below. We can launch these, and we have settings for text. We'll find these settings on most of the applications, although that is of course app specific. One of the big focuses of the iPad is Ebooks. We're going to launch the Ibooks application, and we're already viewing Winnie the Pooh. This you actually do turn almost just like a page. As you see, we have full color graphics here, and a much more book-like experience than something like the Amazon Kindle. If we go to our library, we even have a bookshelf where we can view our different books. If we flip the phone around, the iPad around, we get the larger view. Again, we flick through it just like a regular book. The iBooks app is definitely a lot more graphically rich than what we see with the Amazon Kindle. However, the Kindle is a much smaller device than the iPad. For those who are just concerned about reading books, the e-ink display is better on the eyes, and the Kindle is way more portable. However, the iPad offers a lot of nice functionality with the internet connection and real internet that the Kindle just can't offer. Let's take a look at a couple games for the iPad. First, we're going to launch the iPad version of Labyrinth. A lot of iPad apps are designated HD, even though the iPad does not have an HD display. This does, however, mean that we have the large graphics and everything's optimized for the iPad. As you can see, this is pretty graphically rich. Let's get into some spaces where we can get in trouble. Not really too concerned about playing the game here, but everything does look very nice on the iPad. Let's kick out of this real quick and launch the original Labyrinth, originally designed for the iPhone. We have this little 1x, 2x button down at the bottom that we find for original iPhone applications. As you can see, this runs in the native iPhone resolution, which means there's a lot of black space around. Bumping it up to 2x does increase the size and take care of most of that space. However, it also decreases graphics because the pixels aren't actually increased, they're just doubled. Overall gaming was pretty smooth on the iPad. There's a lot of potential, just like we see on the iPhone. Driving games, you can use the accelerometer, as well as other flying games. The iPad is not nearly as portable as the iPhone, however, so we don't think it's going to be as much of a competition to devices like the Nintendo DS as the iPhone is. Of course, since it runs the iPhone OS, it also has mobile Safari. Let's go ahead and pull up PhoneArena here, and we can see what it's like. Anyone who's used Safari before shouldn't be too surprised. The biggest thing that is lacking is Flash, though to be honest, we didn't notice it all that often. Very popular pages like Hulu, for example, aren't going to work for you, but we found a lot of things, even ESPN, has been optimized for the iPad, and we can launch their videos on the device. Still, because of the lack of Flash, you truly don't get the internet experience that you do on a netbook or something similar. Here we've got our website. Of course, we have pinch to zoom capabilities. We can double tap on areas or click a link. The loading is pretty quick. Our device is of course running Wi-Fi. The 3G version won't be available just yet. When we click on the text, it brings up the screen, or formats the text to the screen size, and then we can zoom in further if need be. It very smoothly pans around, and the accelerometer is extremely quick. The iPad is powered by Apple's A4 1 GHz processor, which seems to be quite enough for what this does. So the million-dollar question is, what exactly does the iPad bring to the table that's going to compel me to spend at least $500? We're not quite sure about this, to be honest. It's definitely a bridge device. It's not a smartphone, but it's not a netbook. It bridges that gap where you don't want to lug something quite as big as a netbook around. Although to be honest, the size isn't really that much different. Because it's not a smartphone, it's got a much larger display and much more graphics to work with. We think it has a great potential for periodicals like magazines and newspapers. The size of the iPad is just enough to be portable, but still big enough that you're going to have to put it in a bag. It's something that's nice to sit around on the couch with and browse the internet, or watch videos in bed. However, for those people that have computers, you can do the same thing with a little bit clunkier device. The thing about the iPad is it really doesn't do anything that something else doesn't do. It may do some things better. We like the ebook interface very, very much. However, as we pointed out, the Kindle's a lot smaller and the e-ink is better for your eyes. In the end, we think the iPad really comes down to money. If you've got the money to spend on it, and keep in mind that the cost of ownership is going to be high as well. Most apps are 1.5 to 2 times the price of the iPhone. the iPad might be the right device for you. It is very fun to play with, but the novelty does wear off. It's a cool device, and we're sure it'll find a niche. We just don't know that it's ready for the full mainstream yet, like the iPhone was.